walked into his office, and for the first 20 minutes of a 1 hour conversation with him were, okay, how many employees are at this company? What's their market cap? Do they need us more than we need them? How many other alternative sources of
Sure.
supply do we have? I couldn't answer a
The
single
business
one of those
questions.
questions.
The business questions.
I realized how relevant those questions
Yes.
were to my negotiation, to
Mhm.
what we would say,
Yeah.
to how much we would be willing to give. And I couldn't answer a single one of those questions.
Welcome to our next episode of Make Minutes Matter, where we explore all different aspects of our careers, our lives, and finding purpose in what we do. Today, I'm joined by Darryl Chiang, one of the directors in Google's legal department, who's had a very fascinating career. Welcome, Darryl.
Thanks, Karen.
I met Darryl a few months back at an executive roundtable. And what we were talking about at that point was AI. And we'll certainly get into AI because I don't know that there's any conversation today that doesn't cover it. But what fascinated me about you was, first of all, your humanity. I know that sounds like a kind of a crazy thing to say, but I found you to be a very genuine person. And that's not something that I would traditionally say about most lawyers. And and so in subsequent conversations, I learned a lot about you and your career path. And I just think that there is a lot about what you've experienced in finding your purpose, your drive, your place in the workplace that our audience could really benefit from. So maybe we'll start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, just in general.
Well, in general, I think the biggest aspect of my life currently is that I'm a dad.
Mhm.
I'm probably one of the world's oldest dads, though. I had my son, who's now 6.5, when I was 50.
Okay.
So it's kind of a unique position to be in. But it's actually given me a lot of context on my own dad and my mom and how we grew up.
Mhm. It's interesting. I think that for those who are parents, they do have a wonderful opportunity to understand a lot about what life was like growing up from a different lens, and it does definitely give you a different perspective.
Well, I think it also really makes me focus quite a lot on the future as
Mhm.
well. I mean, my work does every day because, as you mentioned, we're very focused on AI, and that automatically makes you think about what the world's going to look like.
Mhm.
But now there's really a lot of personal skin in the game
Yes.
because my son is in first grade and he's got a whole future ahead of him.
In a world that's gonna look very different, in a very rapid period right in front of us. The other piece that I'll just say about having kids a little bit later, and I had mine a little later too, not as late as yours, but definitely beyond my 20s. And what I found is that um, kids keep you relevant. You have to be relevant to have a conversation with a child, whether they're 2 years old, 12 years old, 20 years old. You have to be relevant, and so you have to stay in tune if you wanna have that genuine, authentic discussion with them. So I'll just share that with you as kind of a headliner for what's coming down the road. So, so you started your career when did you learn that you wanted to be a lawyer? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was I went to college in an era where I felt like there were only five professions.
Mhm.
All the people in my graduating class were just focused on those professions. So they were law, medicine, engineering, investment banking, and management consulting. And there was nothing else. And I felt like my quantitative skills and my scientific skills were not good enough to basically do four out of the five of those professions. And I did enjoy reading, writing, and speaking.
Mhm.
And so it felt like a natural fit. I really honestly had no idea what the law entailed other than what I saw on TV and in
Mhm.
movies, which sadly turns out not to be
Not
a
to be
real
true.
accurate
Not to be true.
depiction of it.
Yes, yes.
I didn't really have a family background of lawyers.
Mhm.
my dad was a professor, and so, he was very, very well versed in academia, but I really honestly didn't know much about business or about the professions, and so I kinda stumbled into it, by default.
Yeah. That's interesting. From my side, when I was younger, I wanted to be a teacher really bad. And when I was in high school, I went through the normal counseling process, as they get you ready for that adult stage in life. And the counselor really strongly advised me to stay away from going into education. The field was changing dramatically, and it was moving from more of an individualized approach to kind of a mass learning proposition. And she felt that I would be bored, and that my need for creativity would be stifled. And so she suggested that I go down the legal path, which I did. So I, on a dime, changed my whole career trajectory to go from being a teacher to becoming a lawyer. And kind of like you, I didn't really know too much about it other than what I'd seen on TV, and it looked pretty glamorous. It looked like you'd make a lot of money. It looked like you'd work with some really cool people, and I got into as I finished my undergrad, did a few years in law school. I made it through about a year and a half, and I realized that it just wasn't for me. It just was not for me. I can't even come up with the words for it on how it was not for me. But there was nothing new to take its place. And so through a whole series of roundabout events, I ended up in the banking world. And all of the skills and talents that I brought to the table, I was able to parlay into that environment. But it's funny how I think a lot of younger people today, and there are far more choices than 5 in today's environment. I think a lot of our younger folks really struggle trying to figure out what it is I'm gonna do with my life. That's such a big, big challenge, and I know we've had some conversations about my kids, and one of the things that was very important for me when they were growing up, and they're both adults with professions now, is I wanted them to really understand their gifts, what turned them on, what motivated them, where they felt alive. And that was something that was missing in my childhood. My dad was a fireman, my mom was a domestic homemaker. Um, the idea of once you got out of school was go get a job. It didn't matter what kind of job, but just go get a job. So there was really no guidance for me uh, helping me try to figure out where I was going to be happiest. But serendipitously, I ended up in a spot kind of falling into it like you. So now you actually made it through. So God bless you.
But it was not a easy journey,
Yeah.
and actually a lot of what you just said resonated with me because, funny enough, when I was starting out, I I really felt like I needed to do something different than
Mhm.
what my dad did.
Yeah.
He was very good at what he did.
Mhm.
Um, he was a professor, and I was not very good at his subject, which was economics.
Oh dear.
Yeah, he was a very good tutor though, and he helped me muddle through it.
Mhm.
But the funny thing is that today I feel like a huge component of my job
Mhm.
is teaching,
Yes.
much the way he taught.
Mhm.
And I can reflect back on a lot of the things he told me about teaching and what makes for a good teacher, as well as all the things he did when we were growing up. And he
Mhm.
was tutoring us, in all sorts of different subjects. And it all comes back to me, and I realize there's a sort of full circle about it.
Yes, yes, there absolutely is, and whether you're working with your kids or whether you're working with colleagues and people that may report to you or that you work with, I think this whole idea of being able to share and and help people learn all around us, especially in today's times, is such an incredible gift. So good for you. Um, Tell us a little bit about once you got through law school, I know that that was an interesting moment for you. You made it to the other side. God bless you. and then found yourself looking for a job. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, actually, if I can step back one step,
Sure.
because it wasn't a foregone conclusion that I was going to make it through
Oh,
law school.
really? Well,
Yeah,
good. That makes me feel better.
yeah. No, I mean, because I do meet a lot of people through our law school's sort of mentorship program,
Mhm.
and they're current students, and I always ask them whether they like law school, and surprisingly, a lot of them say they love it. Because I wasn't one of those sorts of people. I really
Mm.
actually disliked it.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly, right before my first set of final exams in my first semester of law
Mhm.
school. Um, it was winter,
Yeah.
and my apartment overlooked the Cambridge Common, and
Mhm.
on one side of the common there was a subway entrance, and on the other side was the path to the law school. And I remember I stayed up all night studying, and the sun was coming up, and I looked over the common, and I really literally saw the fork in the road.
Isn't that something?
I said, "Man, I really, really would love to just get on that subway and get out of here."
Mhm.
And it but then it was a moment of real reckoning for myself, and I had to kind of make a decision, and I
Yeah.
decided obviously to go and
Right.
take the tests and face my fears.
Mhm.
But that sort of became a seminal experience,
Sure.
having to make that decision
Mhm.
and realizing that it was actually a good decision.
Yeah.
It was at the very least, even if I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I didn't run away from
Mhm.
something that I was afraid of. I was
Yes.
really
Yes.
afraid of it. Um, and just going through that process, facing up to the fear of failure, was really, really useful, and something that I could always draw on later to
Mm.
say, well, you know what? You made it through that. Try and make it through this too. I
Yeah.
think you can do it. And if I hadn't actually had that moment where a lot of things were on the line and I was afraid, um, I actually don't think that I would be as prepared for the next steps. But the next steps, as you say, were uh, quite confronting too.
Mhm.
I when I graduated from law school, my first job was clerking for a federal judge, and everybody said, "Oh, you're gonna love that. It's a great job to have." And again, I was so surprised because even though I loved my judge, she was a really fun person to be
Uh-huh.
with, and a great mentor. Um, but the job itself, I really disliked. And I was really getting troubled because I was starting to think, wow, this is supposed to be one of the legal jobs that you really like.
Yeah.
And I did not enjoy it at all. Uh, in fact, I knew I didn't like it because what I liked to do was I liked to have conversations with my fellow clerks. I mean, I spent a lot of time with them,
Uh-huh.
um, but I was always really kind of procrastinating and not doing my work. And I
That's a key sign.
oh, it's a terrible sign. And I'm not kidding you. I mean, it's a 1 year position.
Mhm.
And I swear every Thursday night I stayed up all night preparing my bench memos
Yes.
for the judge. I just literally couldn't bear doing it any sooner than that.
Mhm.
Whereas my co-clerk, she was doing it all the correct way.
Right, right. So
She worked hard every
she
day.
couldn't wait to get into it.
She couldn't wait to get into it. She was, I felt like there were moments where it didn't seem like she was necessarily enjoying it either, but she
Mm.
had a lot of discipline, and she was just working at the proper pace
Yeah.
every day, didn't have to do crazy all-nighters.
Mhm.
But somehow I was in that position, and I was the only heartening thing, frankly, in that year, um, was that, I had read hundreds of briefs, and I was shocked at the low quality of them.
Yes.
Um, and I realized, 2 things. The first was that, I think a lot of the lawyers, they thought that the federal clerk and the federal judge were going to sort out the paperwork.
Mhm.
They seemed to file briefs that were simply physically existing,
Uh-huh.
which would mean that they fulfilled their obligation to file on a timely basis
Sure.
and not
Yeah.
be malpracticing. But as far as the substance was concerned, it almost seemed like these were recycled briefs from other cases that weren't really relevant to the one that we were supposed to be dealing with. And it was true that I think the clerks they tried to be really diligent and did
Mhm.
their independent research to try to come up with the right decision. But I was so saddened by that low quality of work. But there was one brief
Mhm.
that was incredibly good.
Really?
I remember it to this day. And after the case was done, I actually went up to the lawyer um, who wrote it, and he was in the county counsel's office, which was not, it was not regarded as the most prestigious
Yes, right.
office. And I asked him, I said, where did you start your career?
Mhm.
This brief is so good. It was so clear and crisp and well written. And he said, "Well, I was an associate at Latham and Watkins." And I was so happy because I was going to be an associate at Latham and
There
Watkins.
you go.
Yeah, and I was so optimistic going into that. I must say though that when I worked at Latham, there were a lot of excellent lawyers and
Mhm.
some very good mentors too.
Mhm.
But again, I didn't like the law firm practice environment, and I realized that very quickly.
What
Um,
was it? What was it that made what how did you know? What were the warning signs?
well, I mean, on the one hand, I really it was very confusing and paradoxical to me because I really thought that the personality of the firm suited me in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Um, but I also at the same time somehow didn't feel like I could be myself.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, I think I had this strange uh misconception about what work was like. It was almost like I expected that putting on a suit and putting on a mask to
To
be a kind of
Mhm.
professional person that I wasn't yet.
Yeah.
I was 25 years old. I
Sure.
really didn't have any practical experience. So I was pretending to be.
Did you think it would be like an on switch that as soon as you jumped into your kind of Superman outfit that somehow or other that you would transition or did was that what you're saying?
Well, I thought that I thought I needed to at least act the part.
Got it. Okay.
And
Mhm.
there were clients that were counting on me
To
to
act the
act the
part.
part.
Mhm.
And there were certainly partners that were expecting that I would do that job.
Mhm.
But I felt very lonely in that role. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, and I didn't feel like there were a lot of resources for me to rely on. That's a paradox because actually the firm gave us a lot of
Right,
resources.
right.
I think what I really meant was that I was afraid to ask
That's
for
right.
help.
Mhm.
And though in moments of desperation, I did ask for help. And I must say that when I was thinking about our conversation today,
Mhm.
it brought back all these memories of this senior associate who sat next to me, named Tony Fenwick. He was a really remarkable guy because his dad was the named partner of the
Oh, wow.
firm Fenwick and West.
Okay.
Um, and I suppose Tony could have just joined his dad's
Mhm.
firm, but he wanted to make his own way, so he was an associate at Latham. And he was so generous with his time. I think he could see that when I came to his office with a Rudder litigation guide in my hand, asking him very basic questions about
Mhm.
how to proceed in
Yeah.
this case, he was patient, he was empathetic, and very generous with his time. And I felt like that was one of the key instances where there was a humanity there.
Yeah.
And when I look back too, I there were a couple of partners in the firm too who really they sat me down and they were really trying to teach me how to practice, how to think.
Yeah.
And one of them also was very upfront and honest. He I essentially asked him whether he liked his job, and he said he did not. Um, but it was such a refreshing conversation because I
Yes,
felt like he
uh-huh.
was being very real with me.
Yeah, right.
And
Which is not something that the legal profession is known for, but
no, no,
yes,
it was
yes.
not. And I think that ultimately it was through some process
Mhm,
of thinking about what he said and also realizing that I was really unhappy in that
mhm.
environment, even though I felt like from an external perspective, I should be very happy. It was
Right.
a great firm.
Mhm.
Um, I had a great life, if you
Sure,
will,
right,
looking
materialistically.
materialistically. But it just wasn't working.
Mhm,
And I think in part what he said gave me some courage to actually leave. Um, I have to say that also uh, my wife at the time, was very understanding. She was
mhm,
also a large law firm lawyer
mhm.
and gave me the room
Yeah,
to leave the firm and without even a job.
yeah.
Um, and I have to say this became a kind of motif in my life too. It was just the serendipity and luck that
Mhm.
happened right towards the end there because I called up my clients 2 weeks before my last day just to tell them that I was gonna be leaving and to transition, their files to,
Right.
the next person, and one of the clients, said, "Oh, you know what? We're just about to open a job, for a role for a very junior in-house counsel, and you should apply for that job."
Yeah.
And I didn't even think at the time that they would want someone who was so junior.
Mhm.
My understanding at the time was really that in-house jobs were for people who were mid-levels or
Yes,
or
right,
even senior
exactly.
people.
Mhm,
Um, but it was incredibly lucky, and I did interview for that job. And just because I had already worked with those
mhm.
folks in their legal department, I think they felt more comfortable hiring me
Yeah,
because I was a known
absolutely.
quantity.
Mhm.
And I knew that was the right job for me too you know, when I reflected on it, because one of the things I didn't like about large law firm practice was at the junior level, quite a lot of it was just legal research,
Yes.
um, looking at a lot of cases in the law library, and kind of it was a very lonely uh, enterprise,
Mhm,
and you were struggling to understand how the cases would fit together,
mhm.
and a lot of times they weren't particularly relevant. So you were constantly struggling with those issues. Um, but when on my first day at that in-house job, um, I walked into the general counsel's office, and it was a very small legal department, and I said, "Where's the law library?"
Uh-huh.
And he looks at me and he says, "Son, in this job, you're not gonna need a library." And I thought, "Great, this is fantastic."
Yes, yes, yes.
But I must confess that when I think back on it, it was incredibly lucky to get that job, and I loved that job. But in the first several weeks of that job, I was actually a little ashamed because I think for Latham lawyers, it
Mhm.
was a bit of a step down. It was a big
Yep,
pay cut,
yep.
and this was not a well-known, prestigious client of
Yes.
ours. This was one of the smaller clients,
Mhm.
and they were not well known at all. Um, and I felt a little like I had failed and that I hadn't made it in the big time.
Mhm.
But what I realized, and this was one of the first important lessons of my career, was uh, after about 2 weeks, I enjoyed that job so much more that it was all worth it.
Yeah.
And I was really actually happy. I finally found the legal practice environment that would actually make me happy. I had rotated through so many departments at
Mhm.
Latham, which was their method
Sure.
for junior lawyers, and
Mhm.
I was getting really depressed because I was thinking, wow, every single one of these
Not my fit.
is still not my thing.
Uh-huh.
But this in-house role really was, and I think that the thing that made it so interesting was at least two things. One was the people that I was working with were so different from
Yeah,
me.
they were real.
They were real.
Yeah.
Some of them went to prestigious
Mhm.
schools, and some of them didn't.
Did
And some of them were really good because they were really street smart, and I
Mhm.
would include my general counsel
Sure.
and
Yeah.
the, assistant general counsel as two people that were the first people that taught me things that you can't learn in books.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really, really fascinated by that. I'll give you one quick example.
Sure.
My general counsel gave me, a contract, an OEM agreement,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, I want you to look through this and come back to my office later in the afternoon and we'll talk about it. And, it was already partially negotiated. It had, the counterparty's name in it, and,
Mm-hmm.
and it had certain red lines in it. And so I looked through it all. I tried really hard to understand how the clauses fit together and what we might say to the red lines. I walked into his office, and for the first 20 minutes of a 1 hour conversation with him, the first 20 minutes were, okay, how many employees are at this company? What's their market cap? Do they need us more than we need them? How many other alternative sources of
Sure.
supply do we have? I couldn't answer a
The
single one
business
of those
questions.
questions.
The business questions.
They were, I realized how relevant those questions
Yes.
were to my negotiation, to
Mm-hmm.
what we would say,
Yeah.
to how much we would be willing to give. And I couldn't answer a single one of those
Mm.
questions. And so, he basically sent me
Sent me
away
back.
to
Sent you
get
back.
that
Yes.
information,
Mm-hmm.
which was more important than what was in the document.
Yes. And how great is that that's how you learn that? Because he could have very easily, said, "Go find this, and this, and this." But the fact that there was an implied expectation that you would know this, he brings it. Where is this? I mean, that whole little like,
Well, you know what it was? It was like the street smart version of the Socratic method.
yes,
It was
exactly.
just question after question that you couldn't answer. And
Hmm.
the lesson you were learning from that was
You
just,
don't want to be in that
oh,
position
yeah.
again.
And it was so much more useful than if he had simply instructed me to get all that information ahead of
That's
time,
right.
right?
That's right.
And it was so memorable that I can talk to you about it right now.
Yes, yes.
But the other really interesting thing that he did was, well, there were two other really memorable things about his method. So one was, no matter how well you negotiated the contract, he would always want to see what it looked like around the last or second to last round of negotiations. And then he would always ask you to go back and get something else. And usually it was what I considered to be a completely crazy
A throw
request.
a
Yeah,
throw a
like
throwaway thing.
like a unreasonable thing to
Mhm.
demand. And I would constantly be pushing back on him, saying, look, I already conveyed
We're
that
already at the
we're
end.
we're
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 at the
pretty much
end.
at the end of
Yes.
the deal. This is like a completely new issue. It's crazy. He said, I want you to go and I want you to do your best to get this. And I can't explain how almost incredible it was, but 100% of the time I got exactly what he was asking for. And towards the end, I could see his pattern,
Yes.
and and but he would say to me, he would say, "You see, you just got to
You
ask,
gotta ask. That's
got
right.
to ask."
That's right.
And I was just blown away by that lesson
Mhm.
too. Not to negotiate against myself.
Yeah. We're gonna pause on this conversation with Darryl for right now, but stay tuned. Part 2 is right around the corner.